Welcome. So, good morning. I want to thank Artur, and it's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be with sharing the stage with Artur and the rest of the speakers today, with Vint, virtually, and most importantly with all of you, clients and partners and friends of Google. It's with you that really we're able to innovate and do some of the great things that I think we're going to talk about in a bit. So let me just start with Google's mission. I'm sure that a number of you have seen and have read Google's mission, and basically there are only a few words here, but they mean a lot. When we talk about Google organizing the world's information, we really mean all of the world's information, and really for the benefit of our users. This includes web pages, maps, videos, books, and all types of information. And when we say universally, it really means universally. We mean to launch our products and the technologies that we build as quickly as possible to, we have an internal metric that we try to launch our products to more than 99% of all internet users around the world as quickly as possible, starting with the first launch into the first language. We also look to enable the access to the information across a wide variety of devices, including on mobile devices. And we want to enable access to data and applications in the cloud everywhere. And most importantly, it needs to be useful. It should be useful to our users, to consumers, to all of us. And what's important here is that the information should be relevant, it should be fresh, it should be comprehensive, and it should be fast. When you want it, it really should happen. So this mission is very broad, and our CEO likes to say that we're on a 300-year mission, not a 3-year mission or a 10-year mission. We just had our 10th anniversary, but really that we're on a 300-year mission, and we're just getting started, which is really, really exciting. Now, Google is meant to be easy. Google is meant to be easy to consumers, and what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of what's behind the scenes in terms of how we try to make it easy, because there's a lot of really hard work and a lot of really interesting engineering problems which we work on to make sure that we deliver these products. Now, we aim and we will continue to aim to keep Google as easy as possible. But making Google easy is actually quite difficult. But that's one of the interesting things about working for Google, and for us to be doing some of the engineering computer science work that we've been doing, is that it is very, very difficult. And it's difficult, but we all also remember that we don't get it right every time the first time out. We actually very seldom get it right, exactly right, the first time out, because we are on a 300-year mission. And our aim is to innovate and iterate and get our products out and improve them based on what our users are saying, based on what our advertisers and partners are saying. So this is really a difficult mission, but we enjoy it. We're trying to make Google easy across search, across applications, and across advertising products. We have literally thousands of software engineers around the world. We have more than 40 engineering centers around the world working on some of these difficult problems. One of my favorite engineering centers is a couple hundred kilometers from here, which is Krakow, and we really work across Google's products, the infrastructure, and also many of the algorithms that we work on to deliver on our mission. And we have to do this in many, many languages. And we have to do this to reflect the many cultures and the many countries in the world. So it is indeed a really challenging, a really difficult task for us to build all of the products that you see from Google. But we welcome that challenge. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about both within search, within applications, and within some of our developer products, how it is that we're doing some of the innovation that we're doing. And I'll share with you also a bit of the culture of the company and some of our philosophy around how we innovate. So let me start with search. And so we just saw our home page, and that's where a lot of us start our searches from. And when I say some of the problems we're trying to solve are difficult, it really starts with the words that you're typing. And Google really trying to find the meaning behind the words. So interpreting search queries themselves is a really difficult area in which we invest a lot of engineering talent. So let's look at some of the examples. Going from easy to hard. The user might say unchanged lyrics Van Halen, and the user mistyped unchanged, although unchanged is a good word. We really should be interpreting this query as lyrics to Unchained by Van Halen. And that's one of the easier interpretations we have to make. And then one other example, how much does it cost for an exhaust system? Cost of exhaust system. So really we're, at all times, we're trying to interpret the user's intent so that we can send to our index a query for the appropriate question so that we can return that same question to the user. The user might say overhead view of Bellagio pool in Las Vegas, but what's best for us in terms of interpretation is Bellagio pool pictures. Or an F-15 launch from a sub, F-15 submarine launch, and you go on and on. The distance from Zurich, Switzerland to Lake Como, and based on the context, really in this case the right interpretation was a train from Milan, Italy to Zurich, Switzerland. So this is really when I say that our work is never done. Our work is never done because users are constantly thinking of new things that they want to search and find. There are hundreds of variables in our search ranking algorithms, and we're changing that formula, and we're changing the variables at all times. And the one really interesting thing which allows us to, and we were just talking about this before the conference started, one of the very interesting things which allows Google to provide the highest quality search results is really an experimentation framework. And when we think that we can provide a better answer to some of the queries, we'll actually run experiments. We run hundreds and hundreds of experiments in parallel, oftentimes, most of the time, without users even noticing, and we're constantly improving on the search query results and experimenting with changes to the variables in our algorithms and changes to our algorithms. So our goal when Vin talks about innovation is really not only about creating new things. Sure that there are a lot of really interesting new things that are created, such as Chrome and Android, which I'll talk about in a bit in this presentation. But there's really, it's just as important to innovate on the products that we already have. On the core product, for example, search, which is what the majority of our users depend and rely on. And our concept is really a concept of innovating fast, innovating in an iterative way, so that we can continue to make our core products better. So let's look at a difficult example. One more example in search. So if a user says, and let's say that this is a user in the United States, the user says they're searching for fruit. So which results should we give? Should we show apples before oranges, or should we show oranges before apples? Good question. And then so one of the things we might do is say, okay, what do we know about apples and oranges? So the U.S. per capita consumption of oranges is 80 pounds, and the per capita consumption of apples is 50 pounds. So, well, this might mean that maybe we should show oranges first. But then we also know that the per capita consumption of fresh oranges is 12 pounds per year, and of fresh apples is 20 pounds. So now, what do we show now? The user search for fruit. There's a chance that the user wants to see something about oranges and apples, and now we have some conflicting information here. But there's another piece of information that we know, that the most valuable fruit crop in the U.S. is the grape. So what do we do now? And it's a good question. There's not always there's often not a perfect answer. And this is what I'm trying to convey to you, is that we're going to work on our algorithms to try to get to the right interpretation of what the user wants, fruit. and we're going to look at a lot of different sources of information. We're going to go to our algorithms and look at our variables and try to come up with an answer for the user. I'll let you try the query fruit at Google and see what you get. But one of our key strategies with regard to search, and one of the key ways that we're trying to innovate, is what we like to call context. We want to know really what the user is doing and what the user is thinking about, and what the context is around how the user is interacting, how the consumer is interacting with Google. And it seems like a simple thing, but knowing context is very important. One example that I like to give when I talk about context is the example of, let's say my wife goes into a shoe store, an example in the real world, and she's going to buy some women's shoes. So she starts talking to the salesperson, and the salesperson, she says, I want some women's shoes, and the salesperson shows her some women's shoes. Now, if that salesperson were a search engine without any context at all, my wife might say, once she starts looking at some shoes, she might say, I want some flats. And at that point, if the salesperson, again, has no context, the salesperson might start showing my wife some apartments. And that's not really what my wife is looking for. She's looking for shoes that are not high heels or flat shoes. So this is one of the really important aspects of the innovation which we're continuing to do on search. Search is by far done. Search is by far completed. Search really still has a lot of engineering and computer science to be done. And it's one of the things that really excites us. It's one of the reasons why we continue to try to hire the brightest and the smartest software engineers all over the world, again, such as here in Poland itself. We're trying to, with search, we're trying to use the concept of a session. So when I talk about context, we're trying to use the concept of a session. When we get a user's query, we try to get context, and this is to give you a little bit of a look behind the scenes. We try to look at an IP address, because an IP address gives us location. That provides us context. We look at recent searches, of course, if that's enabled by the user, if the user is logged in. We look at web history, if the user is logged in. And this all provides us context. And through the context, we're going to be able to know potentially that this person doing a search wanted apples, oranges, or grapes. Here, if you have been searching for a lot of football topics, and then you enter the words Poland, Ukraine, and Google will probably give you something about the European Football Championships. And if you've been searching about political things or trade relations, and then you search for Poland, Ukraine, Google will probably give you a different result, because Google is seeing the context and really interpreting your session in a way to give you the best possible result. So this is the kind of thing which our engineers in search are doing. And a lot of times people think, oh, Google's 10 years old and Google knows search and has figured it out. It's not as easy as that, and we're going to continue to work on some of these problems. But let's make it a little bit harder. We're doing this in the context of an internet which has grown from 1998, when the company was first founded. In 1998, the web was made up of millions of pages, and it really only achieved 1 billion documents by the year 2000. And in 1998, when Google launched with 25 million documents in its index. They were high-quality documents because of the algorithm which Larry and Sergey came up with. And over time then, gradually, Google moved from indexing, for example, just IBM.com, to indexing and finding IBM retailer sites, and then to indexing the IBM web groups and IBM blogs. And so just to use that example. And what has happened, if my animation here on our, there we go, and what's happened is now the web is much broader. Today, there are billions and billions of documents on the web. And 10 to 20% of all of the documents which the Google bot crawls change every time Google goes to those documents. And so given that indexing has changed from millions of documents to billions, and that it's changing now to trillions of items, this is a really big computer science problem which we need to continue to solve. Again, in this 300-year mission, the innovation has to continue because the internet is growing at a very, very fast pace. And when I say that it's growing from billions to trillions, I really mean that, because if you think about the number of videos and the number of images, just as two different types of documents, if you will, on the internet, that internet is growing very, very fast, and so we need to continue to do our work in crawling and indexing in the infrastructure, in our hardware infrastructure, in our software infrastructure. So a lot of, as you can see, a lot of engineering and computer science going on in search, because if we do a good job in search, then we have happy users, and that's our number one objective. If we have happy users who are satisfied with what they're getting from Google, then I think all of us benefit from the businesses that we're in. Now, and we're doing this not only for individual queries and using some of the more traditional properties that we had. So up until a couple of years ago, if you wanted to go do a web search, you go to google.com. If you wanted to search for video, you go to Google Video. If you want to search for an image, you go to the Images tab and you can search for images. But we believe that users, and given that user experience is really important, and since the web is moving beyond web pages, not just web pages like I said before, but a lot of other different types of properties, to books, images, news, maps, and so on, we've developed a concept which we've been building for the last couple of years called Universal Search. And Universal Search is really having a single box that the user can type his or her query into and get everything they need. And the idea is not only to take the information in from a single box, but also to present the information in a single results page or set of results pages. So if you were to search for Martin Luther King, or for Warsaw, or for Les Miserables, we offer you the most relevant results in terms of books and maps and videos and so forth. And the challenge here is the ranking of the results in terms of the relevance to the user. You can imagine that before we were just ranking web documents, and that's difficult in and of itself. And I talked about the apple and the orange and the grape. And now, not only are we looking at apple, orange, and grape, but we're also looking at lots of different types of media, which in an internet which is ever expanding. And so this really makes, as I said, the challenge for us in search a huge challenge, which we're very excited to be working on. Now, there's a couple of words that are behind these images here, and basically what they say is that our goal is to deliver the best search experience. If we deliver the best search experience, if we put our users first, then everything else is going to work. Now, the best user experience happens a lot behind the scene. I talked about the relevance of the results. I talked about the comprehensiveness of results. You want to have all the results that the users want. Latency is incredibly important, which is why we have so much invested in our hardware infrastructure and our software infrastructure. And also, user experience is critical. And I'll give you one simple example, and since I haven't talked much about latency, from very recently, is many of you probably noticed that on google.com we recently introduced the suggestions. So you start typing a query and you see suggestions. That's something which we actually could have launched a few months earlier, but there were literally milliseconds of increase in the latency of the search, and we decided not to launch at that point because we wanted to make sure that we added no latency to the results before launching. So latency is something which we're very, very passionate about as well. Now that's search, and hopefully I've given you a few examples of how the types of things, the types of problems that we're working on. And my promise to you is that we will continue to work very hard and put some of our great engineers, a lot of our great engineers and product people into continuing to solve the search problem, because we want a lot of queries. I know that we all want a lot of queries, and to make users happy. Now, Google is not only about search. I know that I often get the question that Google has all of these other applications and products, and how do they tie together and so on. And you'll have seen over the past few years that we've grown to develop products that help users find and help the world organize information in other than web pages. And so there's a lot of information in video, in blogs. There's a lot of information in email. We need to help the world organize information in email. There's a lot of geographical information, so the maps and local products, and so on and so forth. So our mission has led us to expand our work over the past few years into product areas beyond search. Some of these, sure, are a bit more experimental than others, but the goal here really is to continue to deliver on the mission. And the mission is about information. And information is not only on web pages, and information is not only on search results. So about a year and a half ago, then we expanded our stated strategy for the company from search and ads to search, ads, and apps for applications. And one simple way which we offer users the opportunity to access their applications and what they want to do on the web is iGoogle. How many of you here use iGoogle or have an iGoogle homepage? It's a good number. And those of you who don't, thank you. Those of you who don't, you should try it out. You should see the iGoogle link on the upper right-hand side of the homepage, and you should try it out. iGoogle basically gives you the opportunity to build your own homepage. It's very simple. Just like when you buy a car, you're going to pick the color, you're going to pick the type of stereo or CD player that you're going to put in it, type of navigation system. Or when you buy a mobile phone, you want to choose the type of ringtone. iGoogle allows you to customize the look and feel, and very importantly, and most importantly, I think, it allows you to access a lot of the web applications, the internet, which you use to do your work, to entertain yourself, and to keep yourself organized, to procrastinate, whatever. So really our goal is to enable, is both for ourselves as well as for the world, to be able to build gadgets which you can choose from and put on your iGoogle homepage to access what we call the cloud, to access the applications which are on the internet, which are very, very useful to you. And really one of the things which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, in which Vince Cerf talked about, are the APIs and the developer interfaces that we have to enable other really smart people to build applications. We think that we have some very, very intelligent computer scientists, but there are lots more very intelligent people outside of Google who are very creative and are creating things. And so we enable through iGoogle for any developer, from the least to the most sophisticated developer, to innovate and to create gadgets. And it's really exciting. It's actually kind of fun, if you haven't created your iGoogle homepage, to go to the directory and to see all the gadgets which are on there. And in Poland, you'll see some of the gadgets here. In Poland, we have some local gadgets which Janusz and Artur and the team have worked with the developers locally. Things like the Lotto and birthdays, weather, horoscope, TV program, the YouTube gadget in Polish, which you get to benefit from in your own language. Now, this is about as I said, it's an entry into what we call cloud computing. Now, cloud computing is something which is one of those buzz terms that everybody uses. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we think about it and why we believe that this is a very important concept for how we develop our products and how we innovate. So back to our mission, we really want to enable people to access their information in a useful way and make information accessible. This means that users and consumers should be able to get to their information, should be able to get to their applications from anywhere and really through any device. So interestingly, long before we've talked about cloud computing, news agencies have been telling their journalists in many places in the world to get a Gmail account, for example, to get a webmail account, so that they can always have access to a means for sending in their stories or for getting inputs into their stories. And this concept too, it makes the applications, which we talked about, the internet applications, available to everyone. We have, I know that some of the conversations today are going to be about the enterprise. So cloud computing is very, very important for enterprises and for businesses, in addition to consumers. And we like to use the terms the consumerization of the enterprise to talk about this. So 20 years ago, the latest technology was in the workplace and not in people's homes, whether it be hardware or software or telephones. And at home, we had maybe three broadcast television stations, and not a lot of access to technology. Today, this trend has been reversed. Today, a lot of technology is coming from the consumer world. If you just think a very simple example, a lot of webmail programs, including Gmail, offer you gigabytes of storage space, whereas a lot of people's exchange mailboxes in some corporations still only allow for tens or maybe hundreds of megabytes of storage and information. And so the consumer applications, which are being built on the web, which are being built in the so-called cloud, is really driving what's happening in enterprises, because this concept can work, and this concept is very powerful. It's analogous to how, and this concept is allowing a lot of different types of businesses to use these very powerful applications. One analogy that I like to think about is electricity. When electricity was first being used by us humans in our lives, it really was the case that it was the large companies and the large organizations that had the money and the technology and the infrastructure through generators or through water power generation to create electricity for their businesses and so on. Electricity was not as readily available for the smaller businesses or even for consumers. But when the infrastructure was created for electricity to be generated and distributed broadly and accessed broadly, then that technology became more and more available to smaller businesses and to consumers in general. And this is analogous to what we think is happening to cloud computing. That as the internet evolves, as the platforms become stronger, that cloud computing is going to make really powerful applications, not only available to large corporations, but to smaller and smaller businesses. And of course, as I said, a lot of consumers are already using those internet applications in their everyday lives. Now, and it's important to continue to enable a lot of these applications to be created very creatively. So many of you may have heard of something which Google calls the App Engine. This is an engine, this is an environment which Google has created for developers to create applications for the cloud. And it's something which is very important for us, again, to take advantage of the developers of the world to help the world in innovating and further developing the internet. And it's real. We have one of our large customers for Google Apps is a French company called Valeo. And the chief operating officer of Valeo very often instant messages with the engineers of the company in China. And he types in English, and they type in Chinese, and through quasi-real-time translation, they can understand each other. So this is really becoming real. Now, we do accept that there are a number of things that we need to continue to improve. So we have an engineering group here in Europe that's working on fixing some of the localization types of issues that we have and problems that we have with Google Apps. But Google Apps and cloud computing is a major trend which we're investing a lot of engineering into and which we're trying to innovate around, because we think that the applications which consumers are using, and the very powerful applications which we've been able to develop on the internet, are an important trend in terms of how businesses are starting to work. Now, let's go to talk a little bit about Chrome, which a lot of you have heard probably a lot about over the last month. I believe we launched Chrome on the 3rd of September was the exact date. And why do I talk about Chrome right after I talk about cloud computing? The reason is because Chrome represents really an important step in helping to drive innovation on the web, in helping developers, in helping technologists to build better and better applications on the internet. We've made Chrome open source so that developers can take the code and actually improve other browsers, improve on Chrome, and build great applications that run in the cloud. So Chrome is really an enablement of the internet to grow. It's intended to help all browsers get better, certainly to launch a browser that's going to work really well from the first day. And it's open source again. It's open source also not only in terms of the core browser, but also some of the very important aspects of the browser, such as an engine, a JavaScript engine, if you recognize that terminology, which was developed by one of our groups in Denmark to enable applications which are running in the cloud to run very, very fast on the browser. So we launched Chrome a month ago to really to help enable cloud computing, to help enable the internet to work the way it can work today. The browsers of the past really were developed at a time when pages were really simple pages, the flat HTML web of the past, whereas the web has become very rich and has become very interactive. And things like webmail and maps are really like mini programs running on the internet. Chrome provides the technology and the platform to enable applications to become more and more sophisticated, to run on the internet, so that this concept of cloud computing can really be accelerated. And that's one of the reasons for the launch of Chrome. The other reason, which is very practical, is we felt that we could contribute functionality immediately, not just through a developer platform, but functionality of a browser such as Chrome immediately for users. I've been using it for several months, and just some of the key things that we bring out, some of the simplicity that's in Chrome is really interesting and powerful for the user experience. Again, not just in terms of technology, but for the user experience. So, for example, if you have a new tab here that the user is typing ABC into on this slide, you can actually click at the top of that tab where it says New Tab and just drag it out and create a new browser window. You know, something really simple. It might seem a bit trivial, but how often have you tried in your current browser or the browser you were using before Chrome to take a tab which was inside the browser and just bring it out as its own browser window? You're not able to do that. Sure, that's a functionality which hopefully other browsers will use, but it's an example of the fact that Chrome really has this major objective of enabling better applications to run on the internet, but also of bringing really important features to the user, for the user who's spending a lot of time on the browser, to have benefit from them now. If you have, for example, something else you might want to try in Chrome, which I like, let's say if you have 7 or 8 different tabs open in Chrome, and you see the little X on the tab, when you click on the X, of course, you close the tab. But if you have 8 tabs open and you want to close the first 4, you can just keep your icon. You can keep your mouse exactly at that spot and just click 4 times, and they go away. Because what we've done is we recognize that users a lot of times want to close several tabs. And we enable the user to close several tabs very quickly. Again, this is a really trivial example. It's a very simple example, but it's an example of how we thought a lot in the development of Chrome about what makes the user's life easier when they're running applications on the internet through a browser. And so we wanted to make users' lives, consumers' lives better sooner, as well as to provide the developers who are building those applications some technology for doing that. Now, we're delighted we're delighted by the fact that there have been literally millions of Chrome downloads around the world, and certainly not just in the United States, across the world, including in Europe. But and people talk about Chrome and being a competing browser, and Google entering this browser, the browser wars, and so forth. Honestly, I would be delighted if the functionality which has been launched in Chrome, if the technology that has been built in Chrome were built very, very quickly into some of the other browsers that are out there, which again is why we launched Chrome as an open source browser. We would be delighted if the technology advantage which Chrome has would be gone, and that other browsers would implement that technology very, very fast. Because our goal is to make applications run better and have more and more applications running in the cloud, running through browsers, regardless of whose browser is being used. Not just a Google browser, but any browser that's out there. So really there's certainly an intent to deliver a great browser, but also an intent to provide technology. And through these browser wars, if you will, if the result of it is that there's competition for better browsers for all users, then that's an excellent result. So developer products, as Vint said, very important. Vint referred to our Maps API, and this is an example of an application of a company that's using our Maps API to help consumers find their hotels. I'm sure that a number of you are using the Maps API, which is very, very a very popular API. And again, I want to emphasize that the reason for having APIs is because we think that there's a lot of creativity in the world for developing excellent applications. And Google's not going to develop all of them. We want to give computer scientists, sophisticated ones, and more novice ones, the tools to use the internet and to build applications on top of the internet. And so that's the reason for enabling developers to innovate on our applications. Now, through our developer interfaces. So the most recent launch, of course, of a platform of technology which is aimed at developers is Android, which was announced last week by T-Mobile. The implementation of Android in the first publicly available handset was announced last week by T-Mobile for availability in the US as well as the UK. And I want to talk a little bit about Android. Android, as you have probably read, or as many of you have read, is an open source mobile platform that really any developer can use to create applications, and any handset manufacturer can take and install when they're building their devices. Our goal is that if we're opening up the mobile devices to all developers, we're really going to be creating this environment where there's going to be more innovation, there's going to be faster innovation, and it's going to benefit benefit mobile users everywhere. Last week, T-Mobile announced the first Android-powered phone, which is available publicly. And you may recall that it was less than a year ago, on November 5th of 2007, that the Open Handset Alliance was announced. That was a group of about 30 technology companies that basically announced plans to implement this mobile platform that would facilitate the development of applications for mobile devices. And so developers are driving this innovation, and we've released several versions of the software developer kit, which is a kit used by developers to build these applications. And last week we announced Android version 1.0 of the software developer kit. Now, more than 1,700 applications were created as part of an Android developer challenge. Both Google engineers as well as engineers everywhere participated in this. Many of Google's products, so Search, Gmail, Maps, and others, and you'll probably have read about it from the announcement of Android, and you see Google Maps here on this particular device. Many of our products are available, and you can check out the applications which are available on Android by checking out the Google Mobile blog, and that should be something that's readily available. Now, this wasn't only the announcement of a phone that's implementing Android. This wasn't only the announcement of the software developer kit version 1.0, which is much more robust and will hopefully foster the development of new applications. This was also an announcement that the platform itself, not just the software developer kit, but the Android platform itself is going to be open. And the entire platform is going to be open by December. So this will enable manufacturers and will enable developers not just to build applications on top of the platform through the software developer kit, but it really hands over the power of the technology and the flexibility of the technology for it to be changed and to be improved on by the open source community, and also to foster more and more applications to be introduced. We also launched in beta version an Android market where developers can put their applications for download onto consumers' Android phones. And so again, this was a long-awaited launch of the phone. It's a very impressive device, and the intent again is that this is something which we are putting our technology into. We're bringing our technology to the market to make to allow the world, as we said, to organize its information and make it accessible and make it useful. And mobile devices are extremely important for people to access their information to access the internet through. And Google's goal with Android is to enable the faster development of access to the internet on mobile devices. And by putting literally years of engineering time into this technology and opening it up to the world, the signal is really that we want the internet, we want the web to be the platform for mobile devices, and we want to help. We don't want only to talk about this. We want to bring this technology to allow for the right applications to be built, and hopefully users will benefit a lot from that. So back to again to the introduction of the overall day, and to to some of the things that I've been referring to across search, across applications, across the mobile space. Innovation is key, and it has been key since these two young gentlemen, Larry and Sergey, in 1998 founded the company. Actually, Larry and Sergey got together in 1995 at Stanford. I am sure that the story is well known. But they were interested in data mining and organizing information, and they produced an algorithm which they called backrub. Later, backrub evolved into what's known as PageRank. And Larry says that PageRank, it doesn't have anything to do with his surname, which is Larry Page. He says it really has to do with links on the internet to web pages, and I don't know whether to believe him or not. But in 1998, they built their own computer housings in Larry's dorm room, and that was their first data center. What you're looking at here is actually their second data center. This was in the garage of a current Google employee, of a still current Google employee, where they upgraded from their dormitory room to the garage. And this is really when it's from this time, and that the culture of innovation was established, and it's a culture really that has some important tenets to it. I won't go into all the detail here. I'm happy to talk to a number of you about some of these concepts. But essentially, one of the very powerful set of directions that the founders are always giving and talking about is to ignore some of the traditional constraints. If you're building a piece of software, ignore the constraint of CPU power, ignore the constraint of storage, ignore the constraint of bandwidth, because if you design with those constraints in mind, you will not be able to you'll not be able to deliver the best product. And so when Gmail was first being developed, and Larry and Sergey said, okay, don't worry about storage. Tell people, imagine that you can give people 2 gigabytes of storage, or 1 gigabyte of storage is how it went to market. And people thought laughed about that a bit, but then that way it enabled the team to build a great application. And also, initially, ignore money. This is not because Google is really wants to be nice to users, and that's all we're really interested in is philanthropy and everything. But the idea about thinking about users first and money later is that if there are no users, if there are no consumers, if there is no, to use advertising terminology, if there is no inventory for placing advertising on, then there is no business, there are no dollars or euros or pounds. And so the idea of thinking of users first and then money comes from the fact that we need to serve consumers very, very well if we're going to have a business which is based on advertising or any other variation of it. And there's some rules of innovation which may sound really trivial on the surface, but there's some these are 9 rules which we use, and there are some great examples in each one of these areas that, again, I'd be happy to share with a number of you as if we have a chance to discuss this. And so finally, just managing innovation, it's not a chaos and it's not a free-for-all. We really try to allocate our resources according to a simple but powerful split of our resources, where 70% of all of our engineering and product resources go into the core, into search and ads. And 20% go into related extensions of that, into areas like books and Orkut, TV, radio, and print ads, and so on. And 10% go into some very exploratory areas, like Google Mars and Lively, and these types of areas. I started saying that Google is simple, and we want to keep Google simple. This is an example of how we try to manage the company in a very, very simple way, with simple concepts like the rules of innovation, as well as some simple frameworks in terms of how we develop our products. And with that, since we're running out of time here, I've talked through the concept that you were just seeing on the slide here, which is a concept that Google really is fostering innovation to really enable this connection between consumers and advertisers and partners. And by providing the technology for the internet to grow, we think that that's a key precondition for that to happen. So I want to thank all of you again for your time, and I look forward to spending time with some of you.